Hey, Larry here, Acts 29 today, the journey coming to you from sunny world headquarters in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I'd like to welcome all of the viewers in Thailand from around the world to this edition. So this is the midweek edition where I'm kind of trying to go through some of my own personal journey to get on this path of transformation to spiritual maturity that we're talking about on the weekends. This is December 31st, 2025. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so we got what? 9 hours left in the year of 2025. So this is the last day here in Thailand, and in the US it will be my tomorrow before your last day. So So we ended up with a little bit about what I was doing personally, how I got, I got married, and my vision was to be a missionary pilot with Missionary Aviation Fellowship, but would later find out that wasn't God's vision for my life. So after many years, 23 years to be exact or close. So after 23 years of going to church, okay, and I went faithfully Sunday morning, Sunday night, or Wednesday night if there was a Wednesday night. I was tithing some of the time, not all the time, and but I wasn't questioning anything really, and but those 23 years there was just no real spiritual growth in my life, nor did I see it in really anybody else's life for that matter. We were just doing the do on Sunday, and then the rest of the week we were just kind of surviving, doing our work and whatever we did, but no real spiritual input. So I wasn't questioning the leadership at this time about anything, but I began to get a little restless. And it was at this point that I began to realize that my spiritual walk and spiritual life was not doing well. Now, at this time, my life was what I called a mess. There were marriage issues, probably more serious than I realized. There were work issues. I didn't like what I was doing on either job in construction, or I had to drive truck at one time because of the recession. There was a lot of strife in my life. There was anger, and there was no peace at all. And that was pretty much normal life for most people. So it was kind of like a three-ring circus. And I was just trying to put out all the fires as they would start. I had 3 kids, they were in school, my wife worked, I worked, and it was just like juggling with both hands, both feet, and balancing something on your nose. But something kind of happened around that time. And this is what I would attribute to the very beginnings of coming out of what I call the religious matrix. Coming out of the status quo of just same. I begin to have more of a hunger and a thirst. A hunger and thirst. And that was beginning to build inside of me for what's next. I had come to the point where I kind of thought there's got to be more than this, right? I was doing the do, everybody was doing the do. Hey, how you doing? Hey, good, we're blessed, we're prosperous, we're jumping, everything was perfect, right? Everything had that kind of Facebook life greetings and everything, and blah, blah, blah. But yet, inside, where you couldn't see, there was all kinds of issues, all kinds of problems, all kinds of things going on. But on the outside, we were all, we're all doing good, we didn't have Facebook in those days. But I think of it because I finally got so disinterested in Facebook that I got off of it completely. A year ago or so. But it reminds me of my friend. I had a good friend, and I used to see all his posts and stuff. And he'd gotten married and had like 3 or 4 kids, so I'm following him through years. And every picture is, the family's all smiles. They're at the beach, they're at this place, that place. And everything's like just, got this perfect life, right? And I was talking to him on the phone one day, and he said, well, brother man, I need to tell you something. He said, my divorce is going to be final pretty soon. And I'm like, wait a minute. Your divorce? What are you talking about? He said, hey, and he just went into some stuff that, and he just said, I can't do this anymore. And there were some issues and all that, of course. And I said, yeah, but I said, I've been following you on Facebook for years, and it looks like you got the perfect life, man. And he laughed. He said, come on, man. He said, you know the deal. Everybody looks perfect on Facebook. But he said, it's all fake. Now it's not all fake. I understand that, some of the stuff is legit, and they just, whatever. I'm not going to go into all that, right? At this point. I'm just saying that, I followed this guy, and then all of a sudden he's getting divorced, but his life looked so beautiful on what we call Facebook. And so that's how it was in the church, in the building, on Sunday mornings. Everybody had this perfect greeting, dressed perfect, and everything looked so good. But then inside it wasn't so good. So I got to thinking, well, what's next here, folks? Because there's got to be more than just this. And I began to have that hunger to begin to experience more than what I had so far. And just for reference, this I believe was the first step out of the religious modern day institutional church matrix. And what I did, the first thing I did was I didn't really know exactly what to do. So I just thought, well, I'm gonna start reading my Bible and get into the Word of God for myself. I decided I was just going to open my Bible and start reading like a book and just read it. And that's what I was going to do. I didn't know what else to do. I'm just going to read the Word for myself. Now, that was out of desperation, for sure, because I had to have some fresh manna. Because if leadership is not growing and developing in their journey of transformation, then what they are saying just becomes stale manna. And I've heard the stories of, some of these places, and the pastor, he's got a whole year's worth of sermon, and on January 1st the next year he just starts all over, goes right back through the... And by the way, the children of Israel got fresh manna. That was the bread from heaven, supernaturally provided food for each day. Okay? For each day. And then in the Lord's Prayer that people like to talk about and pray, it says, and give us this day our daily bread. Oh, it's interesting, right? Give us this day. It didn't say give us this Sunday our Sunday bread. It said give us this day our daily bread. That means Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. This day. Okay? And that's a huge part of, course, what's missing in this whole story. Because the living Word is our bread of life, not weekly, but daily. Now, fortunate for me, at this time, there was a well-known minister came to Portland, just across the river from where I lived, and he was there for some special daily meetings for 1 week at I think it was the biggest Foursquare church in Portland at the time. And he was known for teaching about faith, and he'd received a healing from a deathbed as a young man, and he was very balanced, very, very good teacher, went his whole life and never got off the path, never had any problems with, all the stuff that so many have problems with. Well, the pastor at the church where I was going at that time, he knew that this guy was going to be right across the river. And so the Sunday before he came, he strongly suggested in the morning service that we not attend those meetings, that the congregation in his church not attend those meetings. So I attended every meeting. I was there 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening. Well, what happened, brother man? Well, there was another branch added onto my tree called faith. And it changed my whole world. It was amazing. I mean, I ate that up like you wouldn't believe. And so, and I know people are going to go, oh, the word of faith, yeah, that, all that stuff, and they've judged all that, and I know that later on, some of these guys took it and took it in the ditch. And that's where the prosperity, no gospel came out of. I understand that. Okay, I get it. I was in that too. But at that point, I needed to hear the message of faith because it really added so much to my life at that time and beyond. So it was like, wow, I found some fresh food. Faith is such an important limb to have added to your tree. Or in building a house, added to the foundation. On your most holy faith. See, sounds like Jude 20, doesn't it? Building yourself up like an edifice, like a building, higher and higher and higher on your most holy faith. Okay? So I had now something to build upon, because now I had some most holy faith. Then I began to question some things to the leadership, and I was told basically just stay under the protection of the umbrella of the local church because of the covering that it provided. Like if I went outside of this, I was going to get rained on. Well, as I began to grow, some spiritually because of the intake of the word, and now learning about faith, it occurred to me one day that all of the other people around me in that place, they must have already grown to this point and beyond, because they seemed to be, all settled in here. And surely they were seeing something more than I was, and I really needed to catch up to this place. I mean, that's what I thought. Now later on, I found this not to be the case at all. In fact, I found out they were very comfortable staying in the condition that they were in, called the status quo, which means the mess we are in. So it was around this time that as I talked to the people about what I was seeing, that's the people in the church, that I kind of became what I called invisible. It was like I was talking to them, but they didn't really hear what I was saying. Or they just kind of looked at me funny and then just kind of walked off. So when I talk about reading the Word at this time, on the weekends especially, I would drive over to the Portland airport. There was a place to park, watch planes take off and land, and I would just read my Bible there for 2, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever I could get in. And that was my habit, and then at home I would do what I could, but I had a family. Well, I also stopped watching TV and movies with my wife at that time. You might say, well, maybe that's why she's not your wife anymore. She liked to watch TV and movies. And I just got to a place where I just couldn't do that anymore, I was never big on movies and that kind of stuff anyway, just for whatever reason. And, and the movies, I mean, they weren't like they are now, of course, but, it was Hallmark type stuff, and then TV, you know, just like she watched Baywatch all the time, and I'm going, girl, I'm not sitting here and watching Baywatch with you, okay? No. So I'd just go back in the bedroom, put on some worship songs, and I'd just lay on the bed and spend time in his presence because I didn't know what to do. Then it became very clear to me one day, and this is, I'll end with this. I had a good friend in the church there, and one day, you know, he didn't work every day of the week sometimes, so I was going somewhere and I stopped by his house just to see if he was home, and I parked in the driveway and I heard the lawnmower going, so I walked around the back of the house, and but I noticed in the garage his car was gone, so I figured he probably wasn't home. But I went around to the back fence. His wife was mowing the lawn, and she came around and, you know, was pretty close to where I was standing by the fence, and she waved and I waved, and, you know, I was trying to talk to her, but she just kind of kept going, and then she kept going, and then she kept going. And she never did stop and talk or say anything. And I thought, wow, that's weird. And so I just walked away. I just, you know, went back, got in the car and left. And something broke that day. It's like something happened inside of me. Now, of course, at the time, I had no idea that when God is calling you up higher, okay, get this, at the time when God is calling you up higher, when you get off the horizontal path and you get on the vertical path with Him, you will have to leave some people and probably some locations as well. Because at this point, I just thought, oh, I will be at this church, I will be with these people forever. But now I know when you begin to love Him, that is Jesus, more than them, the people that are satisfied where they're at, that will change everything. There comes a time when He calls you up higher, and you will have to leave your familiar surroundings and all the people you've been with and all that if you're going to move on. Now, this is a huge thing for people because they get comfortable somewhere, they have a lot of friends, and, you know, it becomes like the lodge, you know, like an Elks Club or whatever. And they just, you know, that's their life, and they're never going to leave this, you know, because leaving is taking a step that, you know, most people aren't going to take. So I had to work through the process of moving on, and I actually left that church, and about a year or so later, it all fell apart and was no more. Mainly because of the one man at the top. You know, it's amazing how one person can bring down a whole organization, something that could have been very good, and one man that doesn't have discernment can just bring down the whole thing, even when he's surrounded by people with discernment. And so, you know, it's kind of what happened there. Now, because it had been so drilled into me about going to church, I did check out some other ones in the local area and went to several different ones. And there was one that I thought, okay, just so I can say I did this, this is what I did. I joined, I signed the papers, I became a member, I went through the classes, I did everything they wanted me to do. But after a few years, it was obvious to me, for many reasons that I don't need to go into, that one thing, the pastor was probably not really called by God to be a pastor. You know, some are called, some are sent, some just got up and went. And pastor seems to be the only ministry available to the body of Christ nowadays. And, you know, that can be a problem. I remember where I lived one time, there was an old guy that lived down below me, used to come up to get his mail, and he'd say hi on his way, you know, by the driveway if I was outside. But I never really talked to him, but I'd heard he was an old Lutheran minister. So he came up on a porch one day when I was out there, and he began to tell me about there were no more apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, you know, all that passed away and blah, blah. And I said, sir, the one with whom you are now speaking with is one. I don't know, you know, I just wanted to kind of jar him, you know, his thinking a little bit. And he looked at me like a cow at a new gate and just turned around and walked off. So when I was at this church, it was just a matter of time. And what actually sealed the deal was one Sunday morning, the pastor said, you have to be very careful about who you sit under. And he was talking about pastors. You know, be careful who you're sitting under in the church service. Because you will come to be just like them. Wow. Lightning fell, the heavenly choir sang, angels danced, the skies opened up. Shazam! And I felt my body moving because I was almost got up and walked out right at that moment. Because if there was one thing in life that was my desire, was not to be like him. But as I let those words sink in, I knew that was my last Sunday there. Well, yeah, I'm not making these things quite as long as the weekend one, so I'm going to end here. I know your New Year's is coming up. Tomorrow, I will be in 2026 before you are, probably if you live on the other side of the world. And so there's going to be some major things, I'm sure, happen in 26. And I know a lot of people aren't really ready. So once again, you know, we're on the path. And, you know, if we stay on it, we're in good shape. Because the secret to revelation knowledge is praying in the Spirit, tongues for edification, the revelation gift. The destination is the perfect will of God for our lives, for us to discover and walk out in our lifetime. And our guide and helper and revealer of Jesus to us along the journey is the precious Holy Spirit. So I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in this past year, and I will see you next year. Bye bye for now.